Yeah, so it's two different parts of the immune system. A lot of practitioners, I think, refer to these as intolerances or sensitivities, but I'm semantic about it. So I really call them delayed food allergies. It's stimulating an abnormal immune response. So I specify delayed. It's not the immediate hypersensitivity reaction.
Hello, and welcome to Legends of Longevity with me, Joseph Entz. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey towards living a longer, stronger, and more vibrant life. The podcast is about uncovering the secrets to longevity, things your doctor does not tell you, whether it's groundbreaking advancements in heart health, lifestyle tips to keep you thriving, or inspired stories of people who've defied the odds. Together, we'll explore the tools, techniques, and mindset shifts that can help you unlock your fullest potential. Whether you're here to learn how to enhance your well-being, support your loved ones, or just stay ahead of the curve in health and wellness, you're in the right place. Let's empower each other to not only live longer, but live stronger.
All right, I'm here with Dr. Scott Rollins of the Integrative Medicine Center of Western Colorado. He's lived a pretty interesting life, and he's as close as you're going to find to the cowboy doctor you wanted in your life when you saw him on TV as a kid. He's been doing this since '94. He's board certified family practice, advanced cardiac and trauma care trained. He's the first physician in Western Colorado to earn a board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. He's been doing this a while. He's super interested in bioidentical hormone therapy, thyroid, adrenal, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, weight management, and healthy aging. And he's got an advanced age integrative medicine in 2006. Super interesting story. He's also got some curious ones, chelation therapy, which we'll talk about, occupational medicine, and I believe he's made his own ER, or he was just telling me he serviced about 100 heart attacks by himself in his center. So welcome, Doc. This is Legends of Longevity, where we talk about the most interesting things in medicine that are not sponsored by pharma. And we're here for the patients that are on a journey looking for the best tools to make their life better. And hearing about your life and what you've achieved and how you've helped lots of people in a unique spot, Grand Junction, Colorado. It's not on the main road.
I could resonate with a lot of that.
It's out there.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on today. I've been really looking forward to visiting with you. I've enjoyed utilizing your carotid ultrasound technology for, nearly a decade, probably. But yeah, I was in a very rural family practice about an hour from Grand Junction up in the mountains of Colorado for nearly 30 years. And, we managed all the diabetes, routine heart, issues, and got to do a lot of the old school family medicine, a lot of surgeries. And we had a little emergency room where we, with the help of local EMTs at best, would often have to manage, heart attacks and arrhythmias and things basically ourselves, from starting IVs to giving drugs, et cetera. So artery health has always been, a very near and dear issue to me as a primary care physician. Half of us are basically dying of artery disease in the United States, between heart attack and stroke, renal disease. Basically, it's all artery health. And so it's really frightening to me that we physicians are missing about half the people. They don't have the traditional high cholesterol, high blood sugar, family history, smoking, that kind of thing. About half the people dying don't have those risks. And so little family practice docs like me sitting in primary care offices are just missing all these people. So that's part of what really led me to your business and the ultrasound screening as just one tool, to get a leg up and get ahead on these people. And what a motivational tool, man, in a clinical practice, showing people that you've got active plaque in your artery. That's a good motivator. That goes beyond just the good advice. They take my advice. Yeah, it does wake them up. And you can track it. I really, really enjoy and have the privilege of seeing people over 2, 3, 4 years improve their plaque. It's awesome, to see them go from soft to homogeneous to calcified or less of it. It's just such a joy to see people do that and know that they've reversed an otherwise progressive disease.
I love people investing in themselves. I really appreciate that because a lot of people give up or they don't know what they're fighting.
And I appreciate your insight in that. Well, yeah, and it's not rocket science to a large extent. We perhaps in this podcast we can get into some talk about advanced cardiac markers and some other cool stuff that we can do to analyze biohack, people's status with their plaque. Yeah, you know a lot about these things, and I love talking to patients about them. But so much of it for most people comes back to whole food, more plant-based diet, regular exercise, really good restful sleep, which is critical importance for good health, and managing stress, not avoiding stress, managing it. You can do a lot to mitigate the physical impacts of stress. So, when you really focus on those 4 things, that covers a huge amount of ground. I do that before I get into oodles of natural supplements, never mind medications. I mean, there's just so much that people can do on their own, but, there's not really a very good system in healthcare to help them, And that's kind of part of what led me to an integrative clinic of my own. I'm a pretty good cheerleader for patients, and especially over 30 years, I get to know them well, so I can really help them over a lot of time. But, sitting in a family medicine office with a 15, 20, 30-minute visit talking about diabetes and diet, people then just have to go home and really be motivated to utilize that information. I'd like to see, I thought this probably 25 years ago, sitting in a good primary care office, I thought, every doctor's office in primary care should have someone to address nutrition, someone to address exercise, and someone to address the psychology behind it all. Not me necessarily. Not necessarily. Well, not necessarily a physician. And I've had in my office in Grand Junction, I've had a psychologist, I've had a dietitian, I've had an exercise physiologist. But the best thing I've come up with the last decade or so has been a health coach. Someone who's, generally they have a bachelor's degree in the equivalent of, kinesiology, a lot of nutrition, that kind of thing, but some background in training. So we've had a little different credentialing. But the position of a general health coach has been dynamite. I get to see them cure patients a lot. And I just don't have the time, and it's not cost effective to see me for an hour a week, But we have an office and we have a private studio in our office where people can do one-on-one yoga, strength training, nutrition, all this stuff. And it's very inexpensive for them to do that, So that's been a really game changer for me to help implement those lifestyle things I was talking about. And people need help. We all do. I do. People need someone to hold their hand a little bit and hold them accountable and kind of get them, we wish we could just give them advice and they go home and do it.
Yeah. Have you played with the continuous glucose monitors much?
Yeah, quite a bit. I've been a big fan of them way back, and convinced many patients who thought they were under pretty good control, type 1 and 2 type 2 diabetics in particular, convinced them to get one. And almost every one of them begrudgingly would go get it, and then later they'd say, "Scott, I learned so much about what spikes my sugar." And even if they used it for 2 or 3 weeks, fine. They were educated a lot during that time frame. So those are great.
Yeah, on the bottom of this podcast, I'll post links to where you can buy those for yourself with no prescription. It's $100 a month, but the education you get, they last about 2 weeks each, and the education you get is so valuable. Why is my sugar spiking? I didn't know that drink was so bad for me. I thought sushi was good for me. Like, these things start to normalize, and you can guide your behavior so much better. What other tools you like?
Kind of a tangential on that, but specific. We do a ton of work with delayed food allergies, not immediate allergies that involve histamine and happen in seconds to minutes. This is what we all think of. But delayed allergies that involve a different antibody, a different part of the immune system, they take 12 to 72 hours to get going. And this is the part of the immune system that lives over with autoimmune disease and that kind of stuff. So we do a lot of blood test for those allergies, and they often cause significant chronic inflammation that will drive blood sugar. So in all my patients, but especially diabetics, I really press them to do that test see if you're having an immune reaction to certain foods that may otherwise be healthy. Nothing to do with macronutrients or calories. Just if it stimulates an immune response that drives inflammation, then that's going to drive cortisol, sugar, insulin, and so on. So I've had a lot of diabetics do a lot better just eliminating foods that they have delayed reactions to.
And you could find those through a blood test, like corn syrup, or what are some of the foods that are common?
The common ones for immediate allergies that everybody knows about, those are your shellfish and your nuts, and your berries, that kind of stuff. These are more like your wheat, dairy, corn, soy, egg, those kind of foods. Those are the big ticket players. I mean, it could be a lot. It could be a lot of things, but those are the big ones probably. And some people do. Yeah, that's a whole nother layer, hybridization, never mind GMO. There's a lot to that, I think. I don't, the GMO, I'm not so sure how much that plays a role in the allergy per se, but I do know genetic hybridization. I have a lot of patients who do not tolerate wheat here in America, and they go to Spain or Italy or someplace and report, hey, I could eat wheat, no problem. And it may just be older hybridizations and not necessarily the glyphosate issue. That may be its own toxic mess. That's another story, or another day perhaps.
It's a huge other story. But allergies, and the patients react and they notice, and how do they?
Well, we could talk the rest of this podcast on food allergies. It's a great topic. But they're sneaky because you might eat something in the simplest of circumstances. You might eat a food and maybe the next day have a headache. All right, but it's rarely that simple. It's usually more of a rain barrel kind of thing where coincidentally, you get into enough foods that you get enough inflammation that it spills over the rain barrel, so to speak. And then you might have anything from rashes to joint pains to brain fog, congestion, you name it. So it's a little bit tricky. And furthermore, you might have a certain food like dairy. Maybe you only eat dairy twice a week, but that's enough to cause inflammation every day because it takes several weeks for that to go away. So it can be a real booger to try and sort out on your own. A lot of people do a good job trying to eliminate something like wheat, for example, and maybe there's two problems with just that approach. One, if they're allergic to three things and they only eliminate the wheat and they didn't feel better, well, they didn't eliminate the other two things. So maybe, it's not the full picture. The other thing is people often don't eliminate long enough. They're eliminate for a week or so, and the T cells and the part of the immune system that play a role in all this, they have a memory, and it might take a good 6 weeks before they feel better. So that's another little clue when people do eliminations.
Help me visualize inflammation and what could cause it. Like, not just bad food I ate that's kind of foamy and my body can't digest it easily, or like, what should I think of when I'm causing systemic inflammation, or how am I doing it to my body?
This is a great question because some things are equally inflammatory for all of us. Excess sugar, excess, processed seed oils, excess animal fats, these kinds of things to some degree are equally inflammatory for any of us. So that's kind of a general approach to a low inflammatory diet. You're going to eat less of those kind of foods and more foods that are high in antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. So just from a menu selection, we can eat a more anti-inflammatory diet. But then you start getting into the world of immune reactivity. Now you're going to a whole nother level. And so it's one thing to eat a food that may in and of itself cause inflammation, but if it triggers your immune system, now your immune system is ramping up inflammation, and it may be 10 times worse than just the food alone per se. You understand? So it's that immune trigger that can cause what?
Yeah, so like a peanut, it would be immediate and quick, and my whole body would seize up. But you're saying there's lots of foods that are 24, 72 hours later, the system kind of reacts slowly and tunes up the.
Yes, yeah. So it's two different parts of the immune system. A lot of practitioners, I think, refer to these as intolerances or sensitivities, but I'm semantic about it. So I really call them delayed food allergies. It's stimulating an abnormal immune response. So I specify delayed. It's not the immediate hypersensitivity reaction. Yeah, it's a fascinating area. It's one test I would like to do on every patient. It's just crazy what I've seen with these testing.
Yeah, tell me about it, because the testing world, like a lot of clinics have testing overload. There's just too many tests, and what do they mean when you combine them all together? And it's just difficult. But
I agree. I agree. And I agree with what one of your last podcasts, Tom, was saying about AI helping us sort that all out. I mean, I have patients show up with 3-ring binders like this from all kinds of tests they've had in the last 10 years. And they're coming to me because they still need help. And I can take 30 minutes, and flip through all that. Usually I'm familiar with everything they've done, all kinds of obscure testing, but can I fully synthesize all that? Whew, it's a tall order. So I loved what you guys were talking about, AI helping to synthesize that and produce some, tangible plan that you can get your arms around. So yeah, there's testing overload. When I started 20 plus years ago into kind of functional medicine, before that was really much of a thing, there were very few labs. I mean, we were with some of the original labs early on that did more specialized testing, and now they're everywhere, and there's consumer direct ones, and it's wonderful, but it's really hard to make sense, and so I get a lot of patients who are stuck on all of that, and they're not really going back to the basics of diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. So they're you can get ahead of yourself, you know what I mean? And everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants that magic test that gives you the magic pill, boom. And it's lovely when that happens, but we can't do that without the foundation. So if you don't have the foundation in place, it's kind of like when you come see me. If you come see me for artery disease, I'm still going to think about, in my brain, what I think of in functional medicine as some of the foundations. I'm going to look at your hormones, your age-related hormones, way better look at thyroid, cortisol, insulin. I'm going to look at hormones. That is a foundation for good health and artery health. I'm going to look at gut health, maybe food allergies, maybe leaky gut, maybe a stool sample to look at your microbiome. That's another major foundation is gut health, and especially when you consider 70-80% of your whole immune system is interfacing with your gut. What an interface for inflammation. So when you asked about where does inflammation come from in the body, one of the first places to think beyond diet itself is the gut. Do you have leaky gut or delayed food reactions, those kind of things? That itself can be percolating inflammation. So again, even with something like specific, like, hey, Scott, I'm coming to see you for high blood pressure. What do hormones and gut health have to do with that? They have a lot to do with that.
wait, you're out in the country and you're getting patients with these weird food-based, environmental-based.
Grand Junction's not out in the country so much. Maybe it is from the big city, but Grand Junction's pretty much a regional hub between Salt Lake and Denver. It's pretty much the main city. It's close to 100,000 people now.
I mean, driving into your town, you got the river, and then the whole valley opens up, and you see the orchards. It feels so rustic. And I know the Californians, BlackRock has been buying all the houses out there.
Well, it's relative, I suppose, but people come from all over the state and all over the country to see us pretty routinely anymore, even sometimes out of the country. So people are willing to travel a long way wherever you're located to see somebody.
Yeah, can I point out why you're different than most doctors? It's very rare that in a 15-minute appointment, you can get a doctor really bird dog your symptoms or reach back in their inventory and pull out some blood tests or gut health tests and understand the biochem, what's going on and what levers are being pushed. And a lot of doctors just don't have that bandwidth, they don't have the depth, and they don't have the time. And so you'll find some of the best doctors out there with the most range because they're seeing all these they're not so hyper specialized that they only have one solution that they're going to give you, like a new valve in your heart or a pacemaker. It's medicine. Finding doctors that have a broad range to reach into to help you is rare right now.
I agree. Well, thanks. I appreciate that, and it's humbling. I've always felt that way as family medicine docs, especially rural. Instead of dealing with 100 drugs in the category of our specialty, we deal with 2,500 drugs. And our silo of knowledge involves about 20 different silos, not just one, and that's a beautiful thing. I think the old time docs really had more of a holistic, naturally they just had a holistic approach looking at people because there wasn't this super specialized silos. And we need those silos. They're awesome. I mean, oh my gosh, if you need a life-saving heart stent put in, it's awesome what we can do these days, especially in the realm of surgery, trauma, infectious diseases. I mean, some of modern medicine is astounding. And so I have the utmost respect for some of these super specialized specialists out there in the world of medicine. But at the same time, 75 or whatever, the bulk of what people are aging and suffering and dying from fall under general practice. I mean, really. And so we need to do better at, really healing and curing a lot of these things instead of just putting, medical Band-Aids on it. At least try. We can't always, but a lot of times we can. We get to turn around diabetes, turn around high blood pressure all the time.
All right, diabetes. Give me a good example of what goes there, because that's so many people are eating too much sugar. They don't even know they're eating too much sugar. They feel crappy. They're not sure they feel crappy. And what kind of, if this patient presents to you, what would that likely story be?
Well, again, you're going to go back to those basic 4 lifestyle things every single time to some, to various degrees. We're at least going to go fishing. How's your diet? If it's outstanding, great. We'll move on, but for most of us, it's not outstanding. So we got to try and do better. But, simple things, telling people about a study, I think it was done back in about 1994. Somebody studied the average refined sugar intake in America per person compared to the year 1900. Take a guess what they found, as I recall, in the year 1900, how much refined sugar did the average American get?
Let's see. This is Cuba was making sugar back then, so it was just getting going. I'd say maybe 5 pounds a year in sugar cubes.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Good guess, Joe. I think it was 3 pounds. In 1994, as I recall, it was between 50 and 150 pounds. That's like 3 feed stacks of sugar on your shoulder. Now that blew my mind. I mean, forget about GMO, forget about artificial this, that, and the other. That one macronutrient shift is mind-blowingly not physiologic. It's just, it's out of control. So now you flash forward to high fructose corn syrup, which is no worse than sugar. It's just liquid and cheap to make from GMO corn. So, and you can put it in everything. And again, as I understand, I think like 75% of the things in your average grocery store have high fructose corn syrup in it, and it goes by as many as like 250 different names. So we're getting sugar in places you don't even know. It's crazy. So when I advocate for something like a Mediterranean diet, I've shifted my verbiage a little. I don't want people thinking they have to eat like a Grecian necessarily, but my point is more whole foods, more plant-based. Along those lines, I practiced 30 years in a very rural beef ranching community. And, these patients were and are near and dear to my heart as friends and neighbors, and they make a living on beef cattle. So here I am schooled with, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Esselstyn, Ornish, et cetera, Dr. Greger. There's all this evidence that we're not getting enough plants in our diet, people. I would never harangue my patients about their beef as much as be more positive and challenge them. You've got to get 6 or 8 servings a day of these brightly colored fruits and vegetables in your diet. And so I would take that approach, especially with that crowd. So I emphasize the whole food plant-based as more than anything probably. By definition, if people start eating healthier, more whole food, more plant-based, then ipso facto they will, all things equal, eat less of the stuff that we're getting too much of, too much of the saturated red meats and dairies.
I am grateful to see patients getting closer to the earth. I am grateful to see people thinking of the old ways, like your dinner, having soup or salad before your meal. And those old ways just, in a crazy way, blunt the sugar spikes that would happen if you just chowed down.
Yeah, well, it's more complex carbs. I mean, the body's, arguably, the body's main fuel is designed to be carbohydrates. Fat's your backup fuel, and proteins are for structure. and a simplified thing. So it's not that carbs are bad. I have a lot of people who avoid carbs because they're all bad. It's like, no. You need to avoid the sugars and the excess starches. But you want complex carbs. They buffer and they don't spike your sugar like other stuff, So you can't think of them.
Yeah, let's clear that up. So spaghetti, white carbs, those are almost like sugar, right? Or are those complex carbs?
A lot of them, yeah. Well, and refined especially. If you get your whole grains, they're going to break down slower than your processed grains for sure. So rather than the white piece of Wonder Bread, if you have a whole wheat multi-grain, it's going to break down slower. So it's relative. But the point I try and emphasize to patients is that you don't, breads, potatoes, pastas, I think they're okay, but just realize that you don't want that to be the primary carbohydrate source. Don't eat those 3 meals a day to the exclusion of the stuff that's red and orange and yellow and blue and purple and black and green, all those colors. I think in terms of colors with my own diet, and that's what I speak to patients about. It's like, you can get into the weeds of all kinds of technical stuff, but I just think to myself, if I had greens today, yes, sir.
Hey, so reset my perspective. This made sense to me, and this doctor, I'm trying to figure out the diet thing and paleo and vegan, and so successful diets, vegetarians seem to do really well, and paleo seem to do really well. And they both happen to cut out all the sugar in the middle. And so those sugar spikes may be the worst thing. Now, you've also got to consider that your body, the bacteria in your gut, tunes up to digest the foods you eat most commonly.
On a daily basis. It's phenomenal. How you can change your microbiome in a day. It's amazing.
Yeah, and some people do better on a very simple diet that's repetitive because their body tunes up. And other people do fine just, surfing around and eating different stuff every day. And anyways, both those diets can work as long as you cut out this is my understanding. You seem to be leaning more to whole foods, green stuff, which is, yeah, of course. But,
well, when I put, there's such a thing as a clean, and when you say paleo, that can mean a lot of different things, but, a ketogenic even. There's such a thing called clean keto and dirty keto. And so you can eat a clean ketogenic diet and you can include a lot of brightly colored stuff, more low starch fruits and vegetables. But most people can incorporate plenty of fiber. So if you eat processed meats and a lot of seed oils and excess butter and cream and margarine, if that's your keto, that's pretty dirty, and your lipid parameters are going to probably look worse. If you do clean keto, with more grass finished animal products, olive oil, avocado, healthier oils, and you can incorporate in things like arugula and certain vegetables that are lower starch. So I have a book in the office. I think it's called the Keto-Arian, like vegetarian Keto-Arian diet. And I have something on the website where I summarize Dr. Terry Wall's book, The Wall's Protocol, and she reversed or put her autoimmune into remission with a more plant-based diet. And I really liked her approach because I think the same way. It's sort of tiered. When you look at the Wall's Protocol, she emphasizes like 9 cups a day of the various colored fruits and vegetables, but her stage 1, she cuts out wheat and dairy, inflammatory foods. Now we're thinking more autoimmune. But then she goes on and cuts out more like legumes, nightshades, and finally you get to what she calls Wall's ketosis. You're in ketosis, but you're getting a lot of good fiber and plants. You can be in ketosis with plants. So I don't like the term carnivore diet because I know some people are eating nothing but meat. And unless there's a real... Yeah, you got to have lower starch, lower calorie type stuff. So it's not implausible, but you can find, lists of plants that are okay on a ketogenic, and it varies, for different people. But for the most part, yes, you can get plenty of fiber on a ketogenic diet. So I have a hard time getting my head around doing that long term. I know for people that For people that are overweight, that have insulin resistance, that have metabolic syndrome, their high triglycerides, their blood parameters will reflect all this. They especially can benefit from a ketogenic diet. And I'm not an expert on all the research on it because it's not my main thing, but I think there's research to back that up. And for some people, I think that can be an excellent avenue for them. I've helped a lot of patients. They came in and said that's what they wanted to do. So to tap into their, interest and their energy and help them with it, help do it right. So I think that's a real good avenue for a lot of people if it resonates with them. I've had other people that I've gone more, the Esselstyn route where I've challenged many of my patients. I can think of many young men who've come in with high blood pressure, a few that have come in after a heart attack, where I've given them the options like, do you want to go for it? I mean, do you just want to try and go whole food, plant-based entirely and see what happens? And occasionally they'd take me up on it, and that would resonate with them. And they would do great. They'd lose weight. Their blood pressure normalizes a lot of times, so there's different paths, and some of it's trying to tap into what resonates best with the patient. But I think for your average person, for me, at reasonable weight, normal blood pressure, normal insulin, I don't think I would benefit from a ketogenic diet necessarily. And again, I'm not talking about if I had early dementia or other things where we might use keto as a treatment tool. I'm just talking about prevention. I think the evidence is pretty strong that a Mediterranean type diet. You've had podcasts. I think you've had podcasts on the blue zones and these kind of things, and that's a big component of it. And I just look at my own family history. Multiple generations living in a rural setting with our own gardens, wild meat, lots of fruits and vegetables that were often raised right there on our farm. Even in my grandparents' generation, and for the most part, people living up into their 80s and 90s, pretty darn functional. So I think that's a huge thing.
That's what we're getting away from. Okay, I heard I'm more paleo ketogenic because I don't know. I heard this fact and I got to double, triple check it. But if you're eating carbs, there's like no upper limit to how many calories you can eat a day, like 25,000 calories a day. But if you're eating paleo meat-based diet, after like 3,000 calories, your body just passes it. Any fats, oils, that's why you got the slickery poo after. It's hard to eat on paleo. It's hard to get the sugar spikes if you're on those ketogenic diets. But if you're on a carb diet or a real refined diet, like your body just wants more and more. And those foods are programmed by the very same people who created the nicotine tobacco industry when they bought out Frito-Lay and back in the 80s. All that science was applied. So this snack foods are just, I bet you can't eat just one. Like that's a legal statement.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of getting into two different issues there. I agree with you. Strictly speaking, I don't know about the limit, this carb limit, fat limit. I've not heard of that. It from just a satiety standpoint, it may be some truth to that. But on a different topic, food science. Oh Lord, yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, there's geniuses behind the food science. I think a lot of the tobacco industry scientists went to work, for the food industry years ago to apply their knowledge, and they're geniuses at putting stuff in there to get you hooked. I know. And so again, back to whole foods. So I think if you discount the processed foods and then the excessive starch and refined foods and all that, I don't think that craving is such an issue. In fact, this for the same calories, a salad's going to fill up your stomach a whole lot quicker for the same calories than a little bit of fat, right? This. I mean, just the bulk. So you've got those kind of issues. Well, again, I get patients who are on either side of the fence, and I try my best to just work with them where they are, present them with other avenues, share with them what I do, what I think. Knock on wood, at 61, My last vasolab scan was clean, and my artery age was about 45. My blood pressure's normal, so it's working, and I've been on a Mediterranean type diet, not, religiously, pretty well, for probably 20 years, It's not that difficult. My son just got an elk last week, so we're looking forward to some elk meat. So we get red meat periodically, but probably half the days we don't. No big deal. Make a lot of homemade soups and foods and put up a lot of food. So it's not that hard to do.
And you go fishing with Michael, the tech, your ultrasound tech. Is that true?
He likes to, well, we've not been able to cross paths, but we talk about it. But you know what? Since I've retired from my practice in the mountains here, I have, instead of being on call for a week, I'm off for a week. And so it's a beautiful thing. So I've been doing a lot more camping and paddleboarding, and maybe Michael and I'll go fishing now that I've got more time.
Dude, you're living the dream. I'm happy for you. All right, how about cool gizmos,
Well, still really enjoying medicine, and part-time at the Integrative Medicine Center. I don't foresee really ever quitting because it's so cool and interesting and fun to learn more, and keep doing it. So just having a better balance is a really nice thing. Go ahead, you were gonna.
Tell me how satisfying helping others help themselves is the best part of your job.
Well, I mean, we're like teachers, we're healers. There's nothing better for a teacher when, they see their student excel. There's nothing better for a coach when they see their athlete excel. We can guide them, but they have to put in the work. And so I very much think of myself as a teacher, primarily. I can give you my opinion, but ultimately it's more what knowledge can I give you to make your own decisions and to motivate you, to practice, to study, if you will, to do the same things you would expect from a student or an athlete. That's what we're all in it for. I mean, it's great to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and sometimes we get to do that. You make this obscure diagnosis that nobody'd ever thought of before. Once in a while, you get to do that, and that's fun. Or, somebody young comes in having a heart attack, and you get to do something to just save them right then and there. And especially in a remote setting where you're scared, being there by yourself, it's like, So to be able to do that kind of stuff's really fun. But by and large, the most rewarding thing is seeing people, just generally improve their health by the efforts, that put into it. That's rewarding.
Gizmos, therapies, and education that you get. Like, I believe we met at a Bale Donine, or how did we meet?
Man, it's been so long ago. Maybe it's been so long ago. I don't even remember. We've been probably scanning with you for a decade, I would think.
At least. And I mean, I find doctors at conferences, events, and I like it because I get to update my knowledge and see what they're learning. And each conference has its own flavor, things they prioritize. Where do you like to get your education besides reading?
Great question. Thanks. A lot of it, especially in the early years, was just self-study. With the advent of the internet, with the accessibility of PubMed, going down the rabbit hole of that kind of thing. Early on, I started getting, I was a member of Life Extension, supplement company, good old U.S. company. Their magazine and their review articles over many, many years, I would scour them. And in the old days, I'd have my receptionist, I'd pick out a few review articles I liked. I'd have her go get all 70 abstracts and put them in a 3-ring binder for me. So I didn't go down the rabbit hole. I'd just get what I wanted. And then I could just read that and just, so I learned a lot through just sources like that. And then A4M for sure, ACAM, American Academy of Environmental Medicine. These were some of my, standards. And there was a time when I'd go to 4, 5, 6 conferences a year. And as you know, it's expensive. It takes a lot of time. And it got to a point after a decade or so where, looking at this conference or that conference, it was getting hard. It's gotten harder and harder to find ones that I don't already know a lot about the topics because I've been through it a lot. And that's okay. I mean, it's a great thing. So it's harder and harder to justify the time and expense to go for 3 days when there's only 2 or 3 lectures I really would like to see. You know what I mean? So it's that whole process has evolved a lot, I think, for all of us with the advent of webinars and podcasts. But I learned tons of stuff from podcasts, and I pick up books. I mean, patients come in all the time and they tell me about, here's this new book by Dr. So-and-so. Great. I write it down, I order it, and I read it. You know, I mean, I pick up a lot of stuff like that. I'm halfway through a fantastic book right now called Why We Sleep by a PhD, Dr. Walker. And I knew a lot about sleep, but I'm learning a lot more. And it's going to impact my practice, how I prioritize asking and working harder to help people with sleep. Boy, let's not digress on that, but making the point that there's just so much knowledge that's right at our fingertips. You don't really have to look very far.
Yeah, those who read, they go a lot further because there's so much knowledge and pockets of knowledge. And I love that part of the job where people are giving you their best. I just read this book, it changed my life, and they share it with you. And I think that's one of my favorite things that classy people do is they'll share books with you to improve your life.
I always write them down, and I usually read them. Sometimes I get them, and they're like, not such a good book. But most of the time, it's good, though. And sometimes it's transformational. A patient recommended the book, Why You Sleep, to me, probably 6 months ago or whatever. I finally got around to reading it, and it's like, wow, it's eye-opening. It's cool.
Yeah, we don't have a great understanding of sleep still. Is that part of the book?
Not until very recently have we learned a lot more about the different cycles and stages and the glymphatic system and, you know, how a lot of this ties into everything. Like artery disease big time ties into sleep, you know, not just sleep apnea, but the actual sleep cycles themselves play a role in artery health. Fascinating.
I love those mysteries that nobody wants to acknowledge, like smelling. We still don't have a great understanding of how the nose picks apart all those smells.
Sometimes I tell my patients, or it's like, only God knows. It's okay, you know. Sometimes there's just things we may never know fully how they work, and that's okay.
Therapies that you see great success on that you use your clinics. It sounds like explaining it to them a way that makes sense with their mind frame is a huge tool that you use. Having a deep knowledge of, you know, the different resources you can offer to your patients. But any testing therapies, like I love the continuous glucose monitor because it opens the patient's eyes. And you've got a whole bag of them.
You know, we do a lot of stuff that's very, very specific, like cutting edge treatment for Lyme disease or other tick-borne, or a lot of cutting edge complementary therapies for cancer. You know, so we get into some pretty serious life and death illnesses. But with our conversation today, you know, focusing more on longevity, and one of my specialties is anti-aging. And you start looking at the statistics, and again, like I said earlier, half of us are dying of artery disease. Where should we be spending about half our time? Talking about artery health. There's pretty big yield right there. And that's one of those areas we can probably do more for than any other area. And when you start talking artery health, you bring along with it diabetes and a lot of other stuff that generally comes with it. So I spend a ton of time talking about that. Prevention and healthy aging and longevity are still very much one of my specialties and personal interest in bailiwick, for sure. And, you know, let me share, when I started really specializing in anti-aging, and I like the term healthy aging better, 25 years ago or whatever, I was always a doctor that was respectful to not put people on medicines just because. You know, I've always tried to keep people off excess medicines. So the whole idea of supplements and hormone replacement at first felt a little unnatural until I really crossed sort of a paradigm shift. And we know a lot about aging, and when you just study aging, someone that's healthy, they're doing all the lifestyle things right, things happen with age you can't help. And so, you know, there's a lot of this ties into artery health as well. And so when you start looking at, you know, genetics, the 3 billion rungs of our DNA to various extents come apart and zip back together as they need to in different sections. throughout our life, and they do that like mathematically perfectly. It's mathematically almost impossible, but we do it. We zip and unzip and come back together just right until about middle age. And then the nonsense and the missense and the different mutations, as I recall, it's rather exponential. The mistakes start happening at the level of our DNA just doing its basic stuff. And that's not even being influenced by toxins and other things. That's just aging. Then you look at things like, a lot of enzymes that catalyze fundamental reactions in the body. They just kind of quit working as well. They peter out with aging. We quit making as much coenzyme Q about age 50 or so, just because you've lived long enough. And hormones, a couple of adrenal, growth hormone, the sex hormones, these things, about mid-age, they start to decline. And, a lot of our systems are not designed to run as well without these things. So for me, a lot of hormone replacement, supplementation, these kinds of things are really specifically geared to healthy aging. And I have, it's kind of like, I use this analogy a lot. I have a now 31-year-old Toyota Land Cruiser as my baby, and I don't let it run out of oil and just say that's normal for an old car. But that's kind of what we do in healthcare. People come in, I'm tired, doc. Well, it's normal when you're 60. No, it's not. I disagree. Maybe when you're 90, I'll let you get away with it, but no, it's not. I have lots of patients that are extremely active. My parents, they're really active and vibrant in their mid-80s. It's not. It's not a one and done kind of thing. So I very much appreciate that kind of prevention. And I don't take a ton of supplements myself. Most of what I do take are focused on things that change with aging, like coenzyme Q, some of the adrenal hormones that I'd rather have more youthful levels for preventative purposes. So at any rate, that's the longevity still very near and dear to me, and along those lines, when I get into artery health, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm thinking is more this longevity, and this is a huge component. So, testing, the CIMT scan, the carotid ultrasound, has really transformed how I approach it. Years ago, I probably did more advanced lipid panels, and now, without even thinking about it, I probably do more ultrasounds and go from there. So if you're 55, 60 years old and your ultrasound looks really good, I may just tell you keep doing what you're doing. If it doesn't.
Did you make that decision because of the patient? Half the patients in the ER have normal cholesterol profiles, or was it the people who are over 100 years old all have cholesterol over 250? Like, what made you pay attention to the cholesterol less?
Well, multiple things. So that goes back to something that a conversation I have with patients every single day. I get out my scratch pad and I draw a cross section of an artery with plaque in the artery wall, and I draw the endothelial cells. And I explained to them that, cholesterol is a nutrient. It is so important that our body recycles it. It's in every cell membrane in your body. It's a big part of your brain. It's a precursor to your hormones. It is a nutrient. In nursing home and hospice settings, I would see low cholesterol as an indicator of mortalities coming soon. And I think the people who live the longest on this planet have cholesterols in the 220, 240 range even, as I understand. So, but the point is that I think of cholesterol like a wood pile is to a fire. You can't have a fire without a spark. And I teach patients that LDL cholesterol is no different than HDL. It's just how it's gift wrapped. The stuff inside is the same, essentially. And it's just how it behaves out there in traffic. That's the only difference. And it just happens that the LDL, the low density, is the one that oxidizes. And it does not make plaque, period, until it oxidizes. End of story. And inflammation drives oxidation. So if you think of cholesterol as the raw material, it's like blaming the wood pile for the fire. So maybe if your wood pile's twice as big and it's all kindling, you're more likely to have a fire. That's fair. So there is some aspects to cholesterol that I do analyze. But when I help people reverse plaque, it's mostly 90% of the time helping them combat oxidation and inflammation. I rarely am doing much to lower their or change their cholesterol per se. You know what I mean? And and so I think when you understand that, I love explaining it to patients and explaining endothelial function and nitric oxide and these kind of things, because then when I tell them all the other things to do, it makes sense to them. They get it. Nobody's ever told them these things. It's all cholesterol's bad. That's all you got to think about. No, it's absolutely incorrect. So I love, there's a study I love to tell patients about. I can't name it, it's probably so old, but you can measure endothelial function pretty easily. We used to have a machine in our office where we'd do that, EndoPat. But somebody did a study where they measured they fed people a Wendy's sausage and egg and cheese McMuffin. And for about 4 hours after the meal, endothelial function tanked because of all the high inflammatory stuff in that meal. And then the next day or two or whatever, they fed them a big green salad with all kinds of brightly colored vegetables and fruits in it. And for about 4 hours, endothelial function went up. I mean, what more do you need to know? So I tell people about that because I challenge them. It's like every time you eat, it's an opportunity to cause inflammation or prevent inflammation. It's your call. Every single time you eat, you're going to have about a 4-hour window where you're going to determine what's happening inside your arteries, at least relative to what you're eating, And so I think that's reassuring. I think that's good news for people. That doesn't mean that they have to panic and completely radically change their diet. A lot of my ranchers that would every day have bacon and eggs and hash browns for breakfast, I would just ask them, it's like, there's no fruit and vegetables in there really. You could maybe the potato, but how about if you get a little handful of berries, you can get frozen berries, and maybe an apple. Squeeze that into your breakfast. That'd make me happy. Well, that's going to counteract. It's not all or none. I mean, if you can incorporate antioxidants and anti-inflammatory foods into every meal, to some extent, it will counterbalance whatever else may not be so good for your arteries. And to me, that's good news. Being a normal human, to try and eat healthy, it's a challenge sometimes.
Clear up the antioxidants. So oxidizing is rusting, and we want some cells to have oxygen in our body because we breathe it. But we keep being sold vitamins and crap that are antioxidants, like blueberries or whatever. And it doesn't make sense to me because oxygen's everywhere.
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. It's because we burn oxygen, and there's lots of radical oxygen species that are a byproduct. So if you imagine burning oxygen in a wood stove, you're going to get smoke. You're going to get heat, which is good, but you're going to get smoke. And that's all the free radicals, the radical oxygen species. These are normal things. The inside of your mitochondria, just think of a gazillion sparks going everywhere, damaging everything. It'd be like if you opened up the front door to your wood stove and let the sparks go loose in your house. Insanity. It'd burn down instantly, right? Well, your body has an incredible inherent ability to counteract that with natural antioxidants like coenzyme Q. Is one of the most important ones in the mitochondria, and others, catalase and peroxidase. And we make all these antioxidant compounds and to handle this. So we're designed to handle it. So I don't really subscribe to taking a bunch of antioxidants. I don't think that's the best approach. I absolutely get it through your diet. I drink turmeric tea every morning because turmeric's known to be good for several hundred things, curcumin. So there's some things, but in general, I don't think hyper doses of antioxidants are probably a good idea. If my system is capable of making antioxidants, I want to do things to keep it healthy so it'll just do its job. So I'm just not convinced that, and I think there's some studies that suggest that's probably not a good idea to do hyper amounts of antioxidants exogenously, like supplements, when our system is designed to make a lot of those things. Now, again, with aging, that becomes maybe more of an issue. One of the things I do preventatively is try and get an ozone infusion about once a month. Prevention. I feel great, but I know what it does. And then this kind of speaks to your question. The body is designed, we need a certain amount of stress to be healthy. If we had no stress whatsoever, I'm talking physical, mental, in general, cellular, our body's designed to have a certain amount of stress. If we don't have any, we never develop normally. From an immune system, from a cellular level, it's just like a tree that never experiences the wind every day is weak. And the first time a big wind comes along, it blows over. And we're a lot like that. I think. And that's called a hormetic response. So a little bit of stress can trigger a really good response, just like intermittent fasting, caloric restriction. People live longer. It's a little bit of a stress. If you fast too much, it's famine. You starve, you die. So a lot of stress is not good, but a little bit's good. And I think that's what Mother Nature had in mind. And so one of the things I like about ozone, when you mix ozone with blood and put it back into you, the ozone is gone instantly. It reacts with the proteins and lipids in the blood to become ozonides, lipid peroxides, kind of like hydrogen peroxide, but more lipid soluble and longer acting. Well, that's an oxidative stress. Doesn't that sound bad? At first blush, it sounds bad. But it's not enough of a stress that it causes harm. Instead, it triggers your natural response, which is to make more of your own antioxidant systems down the line. So, doing major autohemotherapy or IV ozone, talking about arteries, mechanistically, we know it can increase nitric oxide, it can decrease inflammation, decrease oxidation, improve mitochondrial function in the endothelial cells. So ozone's a standard that I use in people with artery disease, along with alpha lipoic acid, phosphatidylcholine. We chelate and get heavy metals out of these people. These are some of the recipes we use, especially IV, for patients with artery health issues.
Chelation, I'm glad we're talking about it because you can set me straight. At the beginning of my career, there were some clinics where doctors were mixing pans of chelation in their back room and putting it in IVs for the patients. And my mentor dude's like, hey, those dudes can't get insured. Like, this is off-grid medicine. And then a few years later, I see chelation pills, I see other chelation therapies, and I read about it. It's been around since the 20s, 30s, and it was used to get the heavy metals out of the soldiers, the lead, whatever. But yeah, set me straight on chelation, because I have seen some miracles, but not consistent miracles on it.
Chelating agents specifically bind to certain metals based on their chemistry. And so for artery health, chelation doesn't pull out calcium or anything like that. It gets lead, cadmium, those kind of metals out very effectively. And as I understand, up until about 1960, I believe, chelation had gained quite a lot of popularity amongst physicians, including cardiologists, right up until we started doing heart surgeries. And then everything kind of shifted. And suddenly chelation is off the map, man. It's quackery, don't even go there. So, for 50 years, a lot of docs, myself included in more recent years, continued to do chelation. And, anecdotally, we would see people with vascular symptoms often improve after 10, 15, 20 chelations. That's anecdotal. There have been some clinical studies, a couple hundred patients here, that kind of thing, doctors doing clinical studies, not randomized, double-blind kind of studies, that showed good results with, clinical outcomes. But, our office was part of the NIH-funded trial to assess chelation therapy, part 1 and 2. And you talk about a lot of paperwork and effort to be part of that kind of study. We were one of the few small clinics. Most of the participants were giant art centers and stuff. And the chief of cardiology at Cedars-Sinai oversaw that study. And part 1, the patients got about 2,000 patients, each got 40 IV chelation therapies over the course of a year or so. EDTA. And that initial study showed very promising results in a reduction in recurrent heart attacks. So promising that we did part 2 in the diabetic subpopulation. And part 2 did not produce the same results for what that's worth. There you go. But it was good science, good study, I think. One of the points I wanted to make, though, was that out of well over 1 million IVs that were given throughout these studies, no serious adverse events. I mean, there are a handful of modest adverse events, but no real serious adverse events. And these were a lot of pretty sick patients. They'd already had heart attacks and stuff. Some of them had heart failure a little bit, and so that's pretty astounding. So I wanted to emphasize that chelation, when done properly, is very safe. And in the old days, physicians probably did need to mix a lot of their own stuff. And we have, compounding pharmacies supply a variety of different chelating agents, and we have 3 RNs in our office that do a lot of the mixing. But it's very well studied and founded in science, and we have, protocols. It's very straightforward. So you do need to do it safely, absolutely. And we adjust if there's kidney impairment. You need to really understand that and adjust for that. And you need to replace good minerals, because you can chelate out good minerals too. So as long as a person, understands chelation and is well trained in it, it's an incredibly safe procedure. It's very effective at getting metals out.
What success have you seen besides the metals? Like, a lot of cardiovascular guys would use it.
Well, I think in the old days there was kind of a perception that it would pull out calcium. That's not what it does. As you know, it's not calcium that kills us. It's the wet plaque sitting on top of it, right? Yeah, so that misses the whole point anyway, as a rule. But no, it's chelating out the lead and the cadmium and these heavy metals that are toxic to endothelial cells. That's the point, is getting them out of there. There's studies I can recall way 20 years ago or more, Journal of Cardiology or Atherosclerosis or some major journal, showing that lead levels at half the acceptable level are associated with hypertension. So we test people for these heavy metals, and it's like, well, what's a normal level? Well, 0, technically speaking. I mean, there are heavy metals in the environment. To some extent, human beings have probably, been exposed to some of them. So I don't mean to be absolutely strict about that, but you get my point. Lead and cadmium, arsenic, never mind getting into other stuff like gadolinium from MRIs, these things. No, it's not normal that you have blood levels of these things. So I think chelation's a big area. It's hard to,
Right. I want to understand it more. And these therapies that are persistent and keep coming back, they come back for a reason. Like, doctors are fighting for them, and they're not standard in the medical system. And so my eyes are wide open to that kind of stuff, because nobody uses herbs anymore. It's just so rare that a regular doctor would use them. You've really got to find a doc who's got a deep bench to dig into to tell you what to use.
And I understand, and my education in that has been very personal, and just, I remember when we first got dial-up internet in our remote clinic in the mountains, and for the first time I remember typing in pomegranate in the PubMed search bar and finding hundreds or whatever, dozens, if not hundreds of articles on pomegranate helping inhibit lipid oxidation. And I'm like, here's the studies, double-blind, published studies. How come nobody told me about this? So for me, that kind of experience sort of opened up Pandora's box, and just, through life extension, I mentioned earlier, is a great source for me in the early years to read review articles on a lot of these naturopathic type things. So I carry easily several hundred supplements in the office, and use them quite a bit. But my goal is not to put people on a bunch of supplements any more than it is medicines. It's just one more tool. But I carry them in the office. Sidebar on that, the AMA really frowns on that. like I'm going to sell vitamins to everybody to make money on it, right? Unethical kind of stuff, which is complete BS, so I just counter it head on. There's a page on our website that just counters their concerns. It's like, first of all, we don't mark up the price. I pass on most of my wholesale savings, so you can get it cheaper in my office than you can anywhere else. So have at it. I don't have a monopoly on anything. There's nothing I have that you can't get somewhere else. And we try our best to give them educational information associated with everything we pass out. So that addresses their concerns right there. But I learned a long time ago as a clinician, if I tell Joe to go get a very specific kind of coenzyme Q, inevitably what Joe does is pick up some crappy brand at Costco, and he comes back in 3 months and he says, Scott, I don't feel any better. It's like, well, you got snake oil, man. You got the wrong brand. Or they just won't go get it. And so I just started carrying it in my office. And it's beautiful because it's like, here's what you need. This is the best brand. It's what I would take. I can save you money on it. It's a good product. If it doesn't work, it just didn't work, So I like that approach myself. And I think my patients really appreciate it, My receptionist is getting to be pretty expert at supplements, just from dealing with them and talking about them. And it's awesome. So, it's just like anything, drugs get recalled once in a while. It's not like, the pharmaceutical industry walks on water or anything. We get impurities and such. So compounding pharmacies, they're held to very high standards. So, buyer beware. Don't buy some fly-by-night brand, stick with well-known quality brands and supplements, can be awesome tools.
All right. So you brought up something I've been wanting to talk about a little bit, and I'm going to tell you a story that this is how information travels in medicine, right? There's herbs and natural things that are well studied, but unless you go looking for it, the doctor's not going to find it. The patient, it's just hard. It's really, really hard. So I'm starting out my career, and niacin has been known for a long time to increase your good cholesterol. And these guys, this company, got a patent on extended release niacin. So they've got like 15 years to make money. So what they did is they got a sales force. They trained them really well on the research on niacin. They got some speakers, some good doctors to speak and travel. And the reps would put together parties, dinner parties, social parties, lunches, bring the doc around, tell everybody about the benefits of niacin and to order it through our prescription. And these guys crushed it for like 10 years. Their patent ran out early 2010s. And right now, Niaspan, right? Awesome company, great. Well, anyways, they lose their patent. They disband. They're no longer selling Niaspan. It is really hard to find doctors pushing niacin right now because there's no pharma money educating, pushing.
I never see it on someone's problem list anymore. And it's been a long time. I think there were some studies that were kind of not as impressive about niacin. And then also you had came the tsunami of statins too. How much of that overshadowed everything else? I don't know.
Right. But the point of my story is that people don't know about, it's hard to know a lot of different things unless somebody tells you. So in medicine, when your doctor's prescribing stuff, it's likely because a rep came in a few weeks ago, the doc believes it because the research is good. It's all cherry picked. It's a great narrative. But the other 34 things that the doc could tell you about mushrooms or fungus or like there's 1,000 other things you can do. But he's got this one tip at the tip of his mind because a rep just talked to him about it, and that's it. Now, natural stuff, there are reps that go around pushing it, but they've got like 300 bottles they got to know about and every supplement and relate it to. It's just too much. So they find their pockets of knowledge and you can see it. But what's interesting to me is my concierge doctors are emailing each other these supplements that work, like nattokinase. And price and potency spreadsheets, who's got the best. So the way information travels in medicine is mainly through pharma reps. But your good doctors will have networks, they'll be their ears low to the ground, they're trying to find the good stuff that'll help their patients. And because it's not in the regular medical curriculum, it's stifled.
aside from industry bias and pharmaceutical companies funding journals and aside from all that inherent bias and an anti-natural supplement bias, it works both ways. Aside from all that, there are great docs using great medicines out there, and I have a lot of respect for that aspect. For me, it's just the myopia of it that's troubling, in that the only solution is the only pill you know about. Now that's a problem when there are other things. So I don't have a problem with that pill sometimes. It's just that there's a lot of other things I would do before I use that pill. So it bums me out that conventional medicine, my specialty, originally, is pharmaceutical oriented. I remember the last time I took my family medicine boards. I've taken them 5 or 6 times. Never studied for them. Always did better than average. No problem. I'm happy to take the test every 7 years. But the last time I took it, it blew my mind. I sat there thinking, this is a pharmacology exam. Is this the sum total of me as a primary care physician, a pharmacology distributor? It really felt that way. And I just walked away going, wow, that was a really bizarre experience. It made me really sad. It made me really, really sad for our specialty that was what we were primarily tested on. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I've evolved more than the test has. Probably that's more likely. But it's probably always somewhat that way, at least in my generation. I think that's probably true. But at any rate, it just kind of made me sad to think, gosh, where are the studies on diet? Shouldn't I be tested on those? Dr. Esselstyn has some great published studies. Shouldn't that be on the test? Shouldn't I even know about it? Oh my gosh. And so it just, it was really a striking moment for me, though. And so that, I think, is what disappoints me about, a lot of the industry, is just being so myopic. And I'm a victim of that all the time. I know there's crosshairs on my back because I know stuff that other docs don't. And if we don't know about something, it must be voodoo, It's like, no, there's good science behind it. Just because I did the research, went to the conference, learned about it, see it work in action, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's voodoo. Just because all you know about is this one pill, don't criticize me because I know about 6 other avenues. And that's what's really frustrating. And that's what's frustrating to patients. My specialty practice, it started because of consumer demand. When I started doing specialty work in bioidentical hormones, thyroid, 25 years ago, at that time, I was working in emergency rooms and other stuff on the side to make money on the side. And so people started coming to my clinic in Colburn, Colorado, which is like population 500 people in the middle of 1,000 square mile wilderness, essentially. It's a very remote rural practice. People would come from an hour or 2 or sometimes 4 hours away from Denver to my little practice in Colburn. And they'd be like, I am here to have you help me with my hormones. And it was always like, how did you find me in the middle of nowhere? It was always the same. Well, you helped my sister. Nobody could help her with her thyroid, so I came all the way from Denver to see you. Oh, great. Well, that's kind of cool. But over time, that got to be literally every day. It's like, we can't do this. We're a little rural remote clinic. We have an emergency room, x-ray. We're focused on other stuff here. And that's when a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, gee, Scott, maybe you should open a practice in Grand Junction and specialize in hormones, which I did for a couple of years by myself in just a little office, 100% word of mouth. 5 or 6 days a month, I would just go and see people with hormones and thyroid and such, consumer driven. And during those early years, all of us were, for the first time, really learning about gut health and toxins and what we think of today as functional medicine. It wasn't as organized back then, but a lot of us were sort of figuring that out on our own. And so, that just continued. And when we came to, buy the building that we're in now in 2008, financially, we could see that it was probably not a good time. The economy was sketchy and this kind of thing. But I looked back and I just thought, people are ready for this. They are hungry for this. Patients are looking for something more. And to this day, the bulk of our patients are still word of mouth referrals from people that have had success. It's still people looking for better answers to their health, and it's a noble thing on their part. They're tired of the conventional approach, and it's wonderful when somebody comes in and says, you know what, I have this issue. My doc's put me on 3, 4. He wanted to put me on a 5th medicine. I'm not getting better. It's like, I'm done. It's like I'm looking for a different avenue. And so, credit to a lot of the consumers, to the patients, to the people out there. They are looking for better answers, and I think they're driving this whole, revolution in healthcare more than anything. And docs like me are just partnering with them.
Yeah, they're looking for better answers. And I think I got the answer in 2005. I'm getting my MBA. I'm in class. The professor says everything in the future will go subscription. And I'm like, no way. Napster's coming, man. We're breaking out. And then I'm in clinic kind of watching a doc work, and he's like, listen, if I got 10 minutes with a patient, the best I can do is put them on a statin. They're not going to lose weight. They're not going to exercise. That's all I can do. And then the patient's put on a statin, usually for their years, if not the rest of their life. And I'm looking at that as a business model. I thought, oh my gosh, that professor was right. Everybody's put on a prescription subscription, and it seems like the business model is kind of built off of this. So I love that you're fighting it. You're keeping the options open, and your options and they're finding you. They've been finding you. It's crazy. So there's a real need, and I think we're going to see a big split in medicine where you're going to get your 10-minute appointment doctors, or you're going to get a concierge doctors. And right now it's so bad. The orthopedic surgeons are like, listen, our reimbursements went down 7%. Add in inflation, it's a geometric drop. We can't make it as surgeons anymore. So we're starting to do concierge work. It's crazy. We could.
Well, we could spend a whole other podcast talking about my thoughts on the structure, the insurance, the system. There's so many things that I think there are answers for, but you can sum that up largely by saying return healthcare to the free market. Deregulate insurance and let people have a menu of selections. To make their choices. If people invest a lot to stay healthy and are healthy, then they should have a lower actuarial risk for their insurance. And if people don't, it's the same. We treat health insurance different than we do car insurance or homeowners or anything else. It's not even really insurance anymore in that sense. So that it's really hard for good doctors to practice within that system. I know. And I was going to say, there's a beautiful trend happening. Some of my buddies in our area have started membership models, not necessarily limited pool concierge type situations as much as just a membership model. There's 2 or 3 of those now in our area. The doctors are happier, the patients are happier, they generally have more time with them. It's a great model, so it's returning more doctor-patient decisions right there to doctors and patients together. And not relying on the insurance to tell you what you can and can't do. So that's a nice trend to see. I expect it's just going to keep growing. Financially, it's a much better model for doctors. It's one of the few where you can actually survive in a small practice anymore. If you're trying to stay in the insurance system, forget it. Nobody does that anymore. It's extremely rare. When I first started 30 years ago, there were lots of little 2 and 3 doctor practices in our region, and they slowly conglomerated into just a couple of big corporate practices, now hospital-based practices, and that's about all you see in the traditional model, which is going to continue to be quite limiting until that changes. Yeah.
All right, Doc, we wasted a good hour and a half together. Thank you for your time. Super fascinating conversation.
It's fun. It's great to visit with you. Let's do it again and pick a topic and stay on it.
I'd love it. Be well, Doc. Have a good day.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Joe. You too. Blessings.